Dr. Jill Trepanier is an associate professor in the Geography and Anthropology Department at Louisiana State University, and part of her academic research is focused on tropical cyclones. Doctor, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. So warnings have been posted about potentially life-threatening storm surge. You just heard our reporter right there talking about being potentially as high as 15 feet in some areas as Idalia moves closer to making landfall. Just so folks understand at home, explain exactly what storm surge is and how and why it can be so deadly.
Storm surge is the oncoming rush of water when a hurricane makes landfall. We define landfall when the eye of the system, so the very center point, crosses land, but storm surge is extends well beyond that center location. Where the storm makes landfall does lead to the different expectation right at that space, but I want people to be mindful that storm surge expands well beyond the center circulation of that system. And things that can make storm surge worse are, of course, low lying areas, but most of Western Florida is, in fact, low lying. And so I don't think there are many places where people can find elevated areas. So that evacuation is important, and those evacuation zones should be listened to. In addition to that, the western side of Florida has a really gradual continental shelf, which means as that storm gets closer to land, it begins to run out of ocean real estate, and the water has only one place to go, and that's up and then over that landscape. So you see this high level of flooding as a response to that storm running out of ocean space and having to spill over some area of land.
And what is your take, Doctor, on climate change impacting the amount of sea level or the volume of sea level that we've been seeing? You hear 12 to 15 feet of storm surge. Is that greater than what we've been seeing in years past?
Not really. So I think sea level rise is a slower or more gradual process. And so it has to do with large amounts of ice from land melting and passing into the ocean water and thus increasing the amount of water available. So it increases sea levels, particularly in places like Louisiana and Florida, where we have very low lying areas. But that climate change signature that people are maybe looking for really is more related to the intensity of the system, which indirectly impacts the surge. Surge is much more locally dependent and depends on where it's making landfall. So that geography is everything. Sea level rise plays a small piece into that, but I think really it's about that low lying aspect of Western Florida paired with the possibility of coming in at the same time as high tide and minimal places for people to move inland. So I think evacuation and preparation now is important.
Right. And we talk about those low-lying areas, and I know that data from the National Hurricane Center shows that some places will be even more vulnerable to storm surge and flooding in years ahead. You were talking about Florida, Louisiana, but there are also cities like New York and Miami that have made that list. What is it going to mean for people who are living there? And are you seeing the same type of data in your research?
Yes, I am. So, one of the interesting things of this climate change influence on tropical cyclones is really about that geography. So, in the Gulf of Mexico, we already see a lot of development happen. We've had the conditions available to us for many decades to turn, a thunderstorm into a tropical cyclone into a really massive event. Places on the eastern seaboard have not habitually experienced these in the past. So I like to think of it as a shifting in the new normal or the new expectation. So those that live in places that did not historically experience them might now be in that threshold of enough energy available in the ocean. They're able to sustain the winds in a tropical system to higher northern latitudes compared to what used to happen. So I think in those places, getting used to a new normal, increasing the infrastructure to help prepare against these types of events are that's going to be an important component moving into the future for the places that are not used to experiencing them.
Right, and these are big ticket items that are out of a lot of people's hands. And as you're talking, we're showing video of people preparing for Idalia, they're sandbagging and the like. So I want to stay focused on this storm for a second, and I would like for you to talk more about how the residents of these coastal cities can protect themselves ahead of the storm.
So here in the Gulf Coast, we really have a large emphasis on the preparation beginning prior to hurricane season. So having that plan in place before a storm is ever out in the Gulf or in the Caribbean is important. And I think Florida residents are pretty familiar with that, especially given 2022 and Ian. I think what they're doing now as far as getting those sandbags ready, being mindful of the fact that the system, though, even though there might be blue skies in the morning, the system is in fact on its way. So I really like to see and hear about the residents becoming more prepared in the oncoming steps of the storm coming. We have that preparation that we set, and really when the storm is coming, that's when they are supposed to move to action. So it's great to see that they are doing that. They're heeding that warning. They're listening to the advice of local officials. I think besides things like sandbags and of course making sure you have ample supply to fresh water as well as non-perishable food items. Coming in contact with energy is difficult after an event like this, at least for a couple of days. So making sure you have food and water. But if you're in that evacuation zone, my advice would be to leave, because if it's going to flood and the evacuation zone has that signature, it's best to get out of the way and then take stock of what happens afterward.
Absolutely, especially when you're talking about storm surge as high as 15 feet in some areas. Dr. Jill Trepanier from the Geography and Anthropology departments of Louisiana State University. Doctor, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it.